Okay, this video series is going to be about things I have personally run across teaching with students as well as learning myself in the past. And from what I've seen on other YouTube videos, everybody tends to learn on YouTube now. And this is basically about how to improve as a musician. And since everybody almost learns exclusively from guitar players on YouTube, they're always thinking in vertical stacks. And I'm a guitar player myself, but I was lucky enough that the first harmony book I picked up was in this scary place called the library, but it was on Bach counterpoint. Okay, I didn't know any better, but I'm glad I did this because it changed my outlook. And from then I started to study historically instead of just the style I'm into. But this is one of the most problematic areas I see right here, is distinguishing between these two. So we're going to take this. Now Bach, when he wrote that, was not thinking about the vertical stack. Okay? And I'm going to show this in a second. We're going to give this a total fair chance with this chord analyzer program, which is another problematic area in music. Everybody's a slash chord thinker. So let's do this. First chord. The second thing that happens, B minor 11th. Okay, that's what it's going to call it. A over D flat. That would be misspelled in notation. A. D minor. F6 over C. Okay, that's what it wants to call it. B flat. D minor flat 6 over A, G minor add 6, E7 sharp 11, interesting, A7, D perfect fourth, or we could call it sus4 or sus2. So we'll just leave it at that. We'll call those last two sus4 and sus2. So I wrote in all the chords that every single move could possibly be according to the program, and maybe a little bit of addition like sus4 and sus2. We just called the last two of those chords, or the second to last two. Now let's play it. A in root position, B minor 11, A, D minor, F add 6, B flat, D minor flat 6, G minor 6, E7 sharp 11. Something sounds off there. A, A7. We'll just call the rest D sus4. Or add 2, add 4, add 2, and then D. Either way, we'll just consider it one of those two. Now, what has happened there is it's complete and total overkill, because what your ear is hearing is this right here, except for maybe the D sus areas. Our ear's hearing this bass progression. D minor, B flat, E half diminished 7th, A, D. That's what our ear is hearing. It's not hearing all those different chords. So with this back end, the other notes, double passing tone, chord tones, chord, passing tone, chord, passing tone, E half diminished inversion, arpeggiation, A. You could consider that A7th, and then a suspension, or this would be more like a changing tone. But our ear's hearing motion, not a bunch of separate chords. That's the key point here. We're hearing motion over an implied harmony, not a whole ton of separate chords, which means we're hearing stuff in the horizontal plane with implied harmony, not vertical stacks, which can lead to an overkill analysis. So that part maybe is questionable. You do kind of hear that, okay, as maybe an add 4 or a sus4. you still hear that bass progression. That's what your ear is pretty much hearing. So it led to overkill because the program wanted to call certain moves like E7 sharp 11 as the half diminished chord, and that wouldn't even be, the sharp 11 chord would not even be a chord in the history of Bach in that time period. So let's take a modern example. You can listen to this on Spotify. This is The Rise of Skywalker from John Williams. And we'll go through it real slow and see what it calls every chord, because it's probably going to be complete total overkill. E minor 11th, E flat minor 11th. Okay. Definitely not a G flat add 6 or major 7th, no. This is actually much simpler than that. I bet it's going to call this a G flat minor, add 9 or something. There you go. B9. Your ear is not hearing all those non-chord tones as separate chords. What you're hearing is this. Really simplified version. 2, 5, 1. 1, 2, 5, 1. Minor 4 as a pivot to E. So you're hearing these basic chords. I'll do it in root position. That's what your ear is hearing. So the rest are non-chord tones. He's thinking partially in that horizontal plane. So let's take something like an A major 7th and just move to a D major 7th. No motion whatsoever except chord changing. That's chord changing. You could call both A major 7th and D major 7th. Now that way I pass through the 7th, okay? You might want to consider that a passing tone and just call it an A chord. And you could do something like this. You could pass through the 7th on the A chord and then use the, and then a neighbor tone, if you know what that is. I would just call that A, D, A, D with non-chord tones. In other words, there's a little bit of horizontal thinking instead of vertical thinking. So one of the biggest benefits of distinguishing between horizontal and vertical thinking is you won't overkill an analysis. I've seen people take the Tristan overture and literally call every chromatic contrapuntal move from Wagner a completely different chord, and it leads to a massive amount of confusion. Also, when you start thinking in terms of the horizontal plane, it changes the way you write a lot of the times, because you start seeing those little notes as individual horizontal lines, not vertical stacks. And that's why I'm doing this, to show things that may be holding you back. If you can't distinguish between counterpoint and horizontal vertical stacks, then you probably should start studying like contrapuntal stuff, counterpoint. I suggest getting basic SATB books and starting there. There's always a time and place for vertical thinking. Like I said, I was one of those people once too, when I was just mostly into guitar music and everything was like a slash chord and that's all I could read. And then you realize that historically composers didn't actually think like that all the time in terms of vertical stacks. Like in Bach's case, they thought in that horizontal plane all the way from Renaissance music to, even though they are forming implied harmonies, they're not thinking in terms of that vertical stack. So there's a time and place for thinking both ways. And that's what I was trying to get across in this video. And it'll actually change the way you write music too, to be honest. So learn to recognize chords, vertical stack music versus non-chord tone music. Non-chord tone means tones that are not part of the chord. They're horizontally moving, which may form a temporary sound of a different chord, but your ear is really not going to hear that.